For over 20 years, the Fire Store has equipped first responders with the best in firefighting gear. Discover seasonal savings on the gear you trust and visit thefirestore.com to shop everything but the truck.
Well, welcome to another edition of Fire and Training. I'm your host, Douglas Cline, and excited to talk about our next generation on this edition of Fire and Training. Joining me is one of my own, Captain Wayne Jones with Horry County Fire Rescue. Wayne works in our training division, and we're working with a lot of the next generation every time we bring a new group through. So, Captain, welcome on board.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks for letting me be on tonight.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Wayne.
Well, let's see. I started as a junior in '93, and with Horry County, and went through the ranks. Started as a volunteer fireman in '96. Got hired in '01, and been same place ever since. I went to the training division 3 years ago. Come off the engine company, went to the training area, and just working with recruits every day, and have found a new calling in the fire service that I really enjoy, and honestly can't see myself doing anything else other than teaching now.
Well, it's definitely an impact on the fire service and the next generation that's coming into it. So let's go back. In 1979, on January 29th, in a small little town called Mullins, West Virginia, I joined the fire service and got my start as a junior member as well. And I'll never forget that first night. And I've told this story many times, but I'll tell it again. They took me outside. They dressed me up in 3/4 boots, a rubber coat with wool lining, corduroy collar, orange fireball gloves, and a helmet with a big old shield on it. And they did give me a sponge, and the sponge was to filter breathe with. So they took me outside, and of course, it's January in West Virginia. It was a little chilly that night, I can remember. And they pulled an inch and a half off of the truck and put an Akron Select-A-Flow on there, put it in 125 GPMs. And I'll never forget the echoing words of, "If you fog that nozzle out, boy, and put your face down on it, you can breathe." And, I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is like high-tech redneck stuff, and I'll never forget actually going over there and remembering right for reach, left for life, fogged it out, put my face down towards the fog nozzle, can remember feeling the air coming off of it. And that floppy shield dropped over into that hose stream. And I got nose enema and like to drown. And I remember the words echoing through my head of, "I don't know what we're going to do with this next generation of fire service people." So that has echoed in my mind for many, many, many years now, almost 46. And I've contemplated many, many times throughout my career, especially being as involved as I have been in training for so many years, and the opportunity to be out and around a lot of people. What I found is that this phrase was not new to me in 1979. Probably wasn't new in 1969 or 1949 or even 1909. It goes back to Socrates' time when he talks about folks talking about the next generation and, what are they going to do with them? Well, I've done a lot of research. I've looked into a lot of things, and I found that there's nothing wrong with their generation. And I think you've done a little work on that as well. So let's talk about that.
I have, like I said, been in the training division for 3 years. I've taught for many years before then. Been helping teach state academy classes and things. But whenever I got to doing it full time, I noticed that it's not the kids. It was, I think, the easiest way to say it was we needed to change our delivery to make it where they could understand things. Um, Not saying the fire service has changed, but the way they learn have changed, and the way we deliver material needed to change to help them be more able to absorb it. And so I started playing with some things and started keeping track and keeping a journal, stuff like that. And wrote down a lot of the stuff I found and actually started as a research paper for college and turned into a book talking about how just changing the simple dynamics and delivery on the curriculum we were already teaching had a huge impact in how the students were learning and how they were, receiving information and able to put it back on paper and regurgitate it. And it worked out really well, and it made our test scores go up, and a lot more interaction, a lot less headaches for us when they're actually getting the material a lot easier. And it wasn't them needing to change. We had to tweak our delivery for them because you know years ago I heard the same thing. These new kids. It's always going to be the new kids. The older guys are always going to complain on the new kids, but the older guys have got to learn how to be able to put the information where the new people can understand it. Because with us being the people that are teaching them, it's our responsibility to make sure they get it the right way.
Well, and I go back to a lot of this stuff, and you hear it nonstop across the fire service. You hear, no matter where you go, school systems always talk about these kids. What are we going to do with this generation? Well, I can remember thinking to myself, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm trying to learn. I don't know. And my thoughts that night was, okay, teach me, show me. And that happened with a guy that had been dropping the keys out of the window for many years prior to that, for the bothersome kid that would not leave the firehouse. And he came over and just tightened the nuts down on that floppy shield. And he says, "This, if you keep them tight, this won't happen." So think about that. And, you know, I was reminded of that not long ago when I was the duty chief on call. And we had the Chinese air balloon, and it was flying across the United States. And it just so happens it comes across Horry County and gets out into open waters over the Atlantic Ocean, probably in the international waters. And they shoot down the air balloon, uh, this Chinese air balloon. Well, here's what's really funny. If you're thinking about it, they took what is a very complex tactical maneuver utilizing fighter pilots and fighter jets, and they shot down a Chinese air balloon with a Sidewinder missile, is what I presume it was, is what it looked like. And they did it with pinpoint accuracy. And most of the time, the folks that were flying those level of jets were probably no more than 28 years of age. And they're doing complex tactical maneuvers that cost, high amounts of dollars, and doing it with pinpoint accuracy. And our military does this every day. They protect our freedom that way. And we talk about, oh, what are we going to do with this fire service coming in? And I think you're exactly correct, because we got to take a look at ourselves. And it's not necessarily the kids, and it's not necessarily, quote unquote, the older people. It's, you hit it on the head. It's a delivery style. And one of the things, I was having a conversation with John Buckman. John Buckman used to be the state training director in Indiana, and longtime International Society of Fire Service instructors member. And John was saying he was in a class, and we were having a conversation, and that's where this topic came up that I'm doing some development on now, is the next generation. What are we going to do with them? I think part of what we have to realize is that they're more talented than we were. They are more intelligent than we were because of the technologies and what's readily available to them that we couldn't. Our ability to be well traveled. You remember, well traveled used to be that you loaded up and you traveled for a ways, and 10 of you stayed in the hotel room to go to a conference. You remember those days?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, today we can hit the internet and we can be anywhere. It's just like sitting right here now. We're having this conversation that will go across the web to whoever wants to watch it, and whatever country they want to watch it, and they can be well traveled. So, our generation. So, how do we get these younger folks that are coming in? How do we get them to engage? How do we get them to come out of that shell?
So here we go. I'm going to start off with what you were talking about with the Chinese balloon. the biggest thing we can relate to a lot of times is look at the age of the people that are coming through the fire service. I know with our academies, a lot of times it's roughly in between 18 to 50, big wide number. But the average is going to be that 19 to 24-year-old, same age as my kids. All right. I've got a daughter that's a first lieutenant in the Army that's in charge of a mobile missile launching system. So just what you're saying, the technology is there. They can do pinpoint accuracy. You can teach them what they need to know. These kids have great cognitive skills. They need to work a lot of times more with psychomotor skills because they didn't have the hands-on approach like we had when we were coming up, having to tear stuff apart and put stuff back together. But they're really good at taking that information if you show them how they need to do it. With that being said, the kids we're dealing with right now are still products of living with COVID. They were isolated at home during school. They didn't have, ball coaches, teachers. They didn't have a lot of mentors in that time period that we had growing up in school and everything. All they have is a computer screen to somebody to talk to. So we have to embrace them and show them what a true mentor is and guide them through, because for a lot of these kids, we're the first people that truly care whether they succeed or not, because a lot of times going through the systems they haven't had that motivation, that people letting them know we believe in you, you can do it. But when I say that, I don't mean hand it to them. They want somebody to push them. They need somebody to get gritty with them. They've never had that before. And a lot of times when you light the fuse, step back and get ready, because here it comes. These kids want to work, but they've got to have people that are going to be engaged with them, highly energetic, and showing them what they really need to do.
Well, I can't disagree with you at all. And this kind of comes into the concept of we're talking about the why before the how. And with the why before the how, um, I guess I was in the wrong generation coming along, because I always wanted to know why. And, a lot of times you got because I said so. Well, that doesn't help me with a why. I mean, tell me why. That's information. That's imperative that we get some of that, to these folks in a very timely manner. So when we look at this and we start thinking about this group of folks that we have, is when we were coming along in school, and I can remember this, all we did was quantify. 2 plus 2 was 4. 4 plus 4 was 8. I mean, you got 4 apples, 4 oranges, you got 8 pieces of fruit. And that's what we had. Well, if you look at, and I'm a math major too, in one point in time in my life, and, with a secondary education, but the way they do math today is drastically different than what I learned. And what it is they've added in a qualitative and quantitative components together. So in other words, anything you do has to be justified in the why to the how. And it's like they always used to tell us, you got to show your work. Well, we were quantifying what we were doing. Well, all they're doing now is qualifying a lot of different ways. And, I think part of what it is we have a social gap that exists. And I've talked with a lot of folks, Tiger Smittendorf, specifically being one with his, stellar program that he's done at FDIC between, the Xbox to the box alarm, talking about the generations and how it is with those folks and getting them to interact. And I think that's part of what we have, is that we have a group of people that don't necessarily want to interact with from the older side to the younger side, because I don't think they're comfortable or know how. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think the way that the younger generation communicates is trying to communicate, but they don't know how either. So what we've got to do is figure out how we make that merge. So part of where I get to that is I always hear folks say, oh, these kids, man, all they want to do is, look at the phones. They always got their phone up. Well, I'm gonna be real honest. I got 2 of them. So does that make me like the guy from NC State on national television says he's amphibious? That's ambidextrous, by the way, but I have to throw that in there. But seriously, I mean, we use these. I was sitting in a doctor's office not long ago with my wife, and she starts hitting me. She says, "Look around." And of course, I'm looking around, going, "Okay, what's going on?" Because I was looking at my phone. Okay, here I am, an old guy looking at the phone, and she says, "Look around. Look at all these people. What are they doing?" Guess what they were all doing? They were right here, had that phone. And I've said this a couple of times. I got people that said, pull up your usage on your phone, hours that you've used over the last week, and they pull it up and like, oh my God, it's a shock to some of us generational people that are our age and our generation versus the younger generation. So I started asking questions, and I ran across this when I was in Arizona teaching at a conference, and there's a group of younger folks, and I began having conversation with them, and they all had their phones kind of out at that point in time. They were sitting around and they would talk back and forth a little bit, but not a lot. And as I began engaging them, I watched these phones go down, and they began engaging. And so I asked that question point blank, why'd y'all do that? And they said, well, we want to hear what you got to say. And I said, but you put your phone down. She says, well, that's part of the problem with y'all. You won't talk to us. You won't engage us. We want to learn from you. So you go back to your piece of talking and teaching and what we're doing with these folks. They want to learn from us. They're looking for information. They know how to get information. It's at their fingertips. But what we bring that we can share is the relevance behind what's captured in words or in pictures or in podcasts like this. We can bring the relevance to it from realistic and timely experience that we can share. Your thoughts?
I think the phone is a good thing. I think it's a tool, but I think a lot of times we need to be upfront with them to start off with and let them know that use your instructor as your main tool. Trust the person that's got these years of experience, and that way you can actually build a relationship in between the mentor and mentee. Because, in my opinion, mentorship starts on day one in the recruit academy, or when you first get someone. If we wait until they graduate to have somebody mentor them, we're destined for failure. So it needs to be started on day one, and actually, you know, building that relationship to let them know that you're there to help them be successful. That way, you build trust with them, and then that way you become the resource more than their phone. And a lot of times that helps groom them to that more one-on-one conversation, being able to come up to that senior personnel and be able to engage them, ask information, get their thoughts, maybe to help validate something they're thinking. It primes them up so when they do leave the academy, go out into the streets and get on a rig, they've already kind of comfortable with going to that person and asking questions and leaning on somebody for guidance and mentorship, to where if we do nothing but embrace the technology part, we're not fixing anything, we're just adjusting to them. They've got to do some adjustment too, so we can adjust and use technology to make things better. I mean, come on, we're not using the carousel slides anymore. At least we do have death by PowerPoint now, where it used to be death by looking at the carousel slides clicking. But we've still got to groom them for one-on-one conversation, because they're not going to be sending text messages back and forth to the guys in the firehouse to be able to learn. So we're trying to help groom them to be successful, to ask questions. Now, one thing I have noticed working with as many young kids as we do is a lot of times we get a lot of questions, and not so much they want to know the why, because we give them the why first. That's part of the way we changed our curriculum delivery, is we give them the why first, explain it, then we show them how it happens. But we get so many questions from young people, and I've spoke to other instructors across the state and other areas, and we've all come to the conclusion that a lot of the times they're asking questions because they want us to answer them, so that way we can validate their thoughts. Because a lot of times coming up through the school systems or whatever they had before they got to us, whenever they asked questions, it was, okay, so what do you think? And if they didn't have the right answer, they got ridiculed for it. So now a lot of times they're really hesitant on putting out information. They would rather you give them the right answer, so it validates their thoughts if they're right, and if they're wrong, it actually gives them the right answer. So it's kind of a win-win for them without them having to, put any money on the table. And that's our job in the same aspect. Our job is to educate, is to guide, to lead them through what they need to be. But a lot of it has got to come from having trust on day one. You've got to build that relationship with them. And it was probably one of the hardest things it took me to do. I knew how to deliver curriculum. I knew how to make sure that the information got across. But it took me a while to truly learn to build a relationship with the students, almost like I would with my kids. And that was, when you take a break, you sit there and wait for people to come ask questions. You spend time with them. It's showing them, I am here to mentor you, guide you. I'm your resource. I'm not just somebody to stand in front of the room and tell you verbatim what this slide's going to say, what the lesson plan is going to say. I am your resource. I'm the redneck version of Google, if you can't tell with my cornbread accent. But it's showing we're invested, I guess, is the easiest way to put it, because if they don't feel like we're invested in them, how much effort are they going to put to it on their side? If I'm just standing up there going through the motions, they truly want somebody engaged with them.
And I think that's a big piece. And part of what I'm thinking or want to relay out to our listeners is we have to be patient. A lot of
Mhm.
times we're not patient. We have to be nurturing. A lot of times we don't like to nurture. Um, we have this tendency, especially in the fire services, to want to have people that come out of an academy or people that are new or people that are less experienced. We have this expectation that is somewhat unrealistic. We're looking for folks coming out of an academy to have, a 5 or 10 year firefighter mentality. Whereas when we dump them out to the streets from an academy, or when they first come into the departments, especially for volunteer departments, and they're trying to learn and grow as they go along, kind of like an on-the-job apprentice, that's not going to happen. We have to learn to be a little more patient, I think, is one of our problems. We want instant gratification, and that's not how you get it with this. I think we also have to begin working and being, timely in what we deliver, and actually taking time to show them more, taking time to, as you say, coach or mentor them. I think that's a big piece. And I think we've lost that art of mentoring to the level that we grew up with. I came out of a group of people in a generation, and I'm so blessed to have the mentors that I had, around me, and that I still have around me, especially um, through my career, that got me to where I'm at today. And I'm successful because of them, not because Doug's smart or anything like that, or Doug's talented. It was because of the great people around me. And I continue to have those folks. And that is probably one of the most unique things about, fire engineering, for one, and FDIC and the folks that are associated with it. I mean, if I have a question, I can pick up the phone and call folks like Rick Lasky or Salka or Eddie Buchanan or Frank Vicuso, or PJ Norwood, or Dave Rhodes or Dave McGlynn or Chris Nom, or any of these folks. It just, all these people are there, and they all share. And in a sense, we mentor each other, which I never thought about it that way, but we actually mentor each other. And some of these folks are like what I call, the legacy mentors that are there. Many of the folks that mentored me are now passing away, which is sad, because we've lost a wealth of knowledge. We've lost a generation of experience that we don't have to tap into. And I think part of what happens, and we even do this, I'm sure, is we disregard what the older crowd and departments have to offer. And we do this especially in volunteer departments. We kind of shun them or push them out. Oh, they're old, they can't do this, they can't do that. Well, yeah, physically they may not be able to do it, but I think about one person that was in our department for a number of years, and that was JB Johnson. And JB retired when he got to 90 years old because JB wanted to retire, not because he had to or anything. He could, I mean, this dude passed the physical. He could do J-Rats. He did all kinds of stuff. But that was a wealth of knowledge, and he was always willing to share, and he was always patient, and he was always, coaching or mentoring, and always had that demeanor to where whatever I got is yours. And I think that's something we got to get back to.
I would have to agree with you, Chief. The I wouldn't say the part of it is, but we'll go a couple ways with what you were just talking about. The start off with, I don't care what academy you work with, what department you are. Nobody is sending pipe swingers out of the gate at graduation. If they are, I want to go to work for them because I want to be that caliber of an instructor. I'll start off by saying that. But what our job truly is setting the standards for a foundational approach. We help give them the building blocks to get a career started. Because I will be the first to say, as a full time educator, that the true trainers of the fire service are the senior man and the company officer. It's my job to get the recruits started, give them a good foundation for them to get out in the street and spend the rest of their career learning and building more. And, we spend a lot of time talking about the old guys and stuff. And I tell stories about JB, I tell stories about Pops, the old guys that come in. Chief is still in Sockasty. You know, I tell them, when you see these old guys come in the firehouse, get the coffee pot on and get ready to sit down because these guys can't pull hose like they used to, but sit down and just get in their head and learn because the stories they tell has so much education and the stories matter. We learn more off from the front bumper and the kitchen table than we ever have in a classroom. And if we can get them through that and an understanding of that and having them seek mentorship from the elders of the fire service, what they can accomplish is amazing.
I would agree. Totally agree with that. I think there's a lot to learn from what we're seeing here, and I think we also, as older folks, need to sit down and listen to what the younger people have to say and what they're seeing in a perspective that they can see or the relative components that they understand. Um, I'll be real honest. I found very quickly that our younger generation is smarter than we think they are. Um, they have profound skills that we need to tap into and utilize. Uh, I remember coming through and I was one of the generations that came through that when I got deep into my career, I had a bachelor's degree when most people did not. Now I've got folks like yourself and many others that, have achieved that role and, are on the pathways to masters and friends that have doctorate degrees. And, I think it's the right direction. I see people that are seeking higher levels of education, more knowledge, more experience, willing to go and learn from other folks. And I think that's an important aspect. One of the worst things we can say is that everything we need to know is in our four walls. I think that's one of the worst places to be. I think we've got to get people out to where they see things in a different capacity. They get exposed to more and they understand more and opportunities to learn from other people. And that's where, programs, with fire engineering, FDIC especially, being able to be there, other conferences, that are out there that are in your region, just visiting other fire departments when you're on vacation. I mean, I hate to say that, but, a lot of people, oh, I can't believe you went to a fire station when you're on vacation. Well, you can learn something from those guys that you may not even see. And I think that's important.
Absolutely. I would agree with you saying that getting out of your sandbox has a lot of ways to help you grow. Because if you never leave the four walls, you never know how anything else is or how anybody else does anything. I would also say that going to the small micro conferences before you ever get to the big ones. There's like you were talking about regional training, local fools chapters. You know, I learned so much when I went to Atlanta and spent time with Matt at MAFC. You know, just being exposed to a lot of different people. Hopefully, going to be at Smoky Mountain this year coming up. Next go around. You know, it's just that exposure, the networking, being able to talk with a lot of like minded individuals that want to learn. Now, you were talking earlier about education, and yes, there's a lot of more people that are going and getting higher level education. I'm one of them because, you know, I've got goals I want later on in my career, later on, and I've got to have a higher education to be able to do that. But I done it a little different than everybody else done. You know, I spent 23 years on the line before I decided to start going to college. I wanted to gain as much experience as I could and then get my academic knowledge on the backside so I could relate all those years of service into my academic knowledge, give me something to go on instead of me getting a lot of academic and book knowledge that's basically a lot of theory and then trying to get a practical application to it later on. I've kind of probably done it backwards, but I mean, it works really well for me. But I see education as being important. I talk to a lot of my students whenever they get ready to end recruit school, um, talking to them about getting started, because especially the program like our department has, you know, we're learning partners with Columbia Southern, and that helps them on tuition. And on top of that, they get a lot of class credits for a lot of stuff they've done from the state academy. Helps them a lot in saving money and a lot of classes they don't have to take that's already been covered from what they learned in recruit school. But it helps plant that seed that you're always going to have to learn. You always learn. And if you plant it before they ever leave, you don't get complacency to happen nowhere near as much because they're knowing that they're going to constantly learn something. They're always hungry to learn something else. Where if you don't plant that seed, they think they've done everything they need to go. They think they've done everything they need to do. Now, heaven forbid they get to a firehouse that the guys aren't real go getters. They're kind of stagnant. They're going to sit right there and rot. But if you plant that seed in them, they're still going to be hungry. They're still going to be trying to find information from somewhere to try to keep learning. So a lot of that responsibility is really on us to help them grow throughout the rest of their career off of what we do from the very beginning.
I agree with that. Um, we're just we're probably only scratching the surface to begin with here, but I'm sure that there will be more conversation and dialogue that occurs. I will be in just a few short months, honestly, at FDIC. I'm doing a pre-conference this year on developing the next generation of fire service leaders. They asked me to expand the program out from what I did last year in just a classroom session because the last 2 years, the room has been pretty well packed. And some of the comments I got back was, we would like to spend more time on this. So the perfect time to do that's like in a pre-conference to where you can spread it out over 4 hours instead of, your 90-minute sessions that you're doing. So I've got the opportunity to be there, and I'll be there on Tuesday from 8 to noon at FDIC presenting that program. Phenomenal opportunity to, again, be back at FDIC. And thank you to Dave and Diane, who work so hard, the entire staff of the fire engineering group, and the advisory board who goes through all those proposals that come in. And it's what makes that conference what it is. Just phenomenal in the whole sense. Wayne, certainly want to appreciate you coming on the show and sharing some of the thought processes that you've been working on, that you've shared with me, and that you share with students and with firefighters from across the world. It's always an honor and a privilege to have one of my own from the organization on the show. I certainly appreciate you and everybody at our training division does. We have what I consider to be one of the best fire and EMS training divisions in the world. I would put y'all up against anybody. I put the EMS side up against anybody. We're doing some phenomenal things. Very proud of that, and just appreciate having an opportunity to let you come on the show and talk a little more about fire and training. And we're pretty much dedicated to making sure the folks in the field and on fire and training have all the knowledge and education that we can possibly give them. And we're committed, and I'm personally committed to making sure everyone goes home. Final comments before we get out of here, Wayne.
Yeah, some of the stuff we've been talking about, Chief. I'm gonna throw a bone out to staff. Firefighter Nation on the Fire Engineering platform has grown tremendously in the last little while, and it's because of the leadership of Stephanie White with her taking her new role as editor in chief of that. And a lot of what we are talking about in the realms of mentorship, instruction, and just daily firefighter things to accomplish, and basically what we're talking about in a nutshell, engaging with the younger students, building that bridge to fix the cultural gaps. A lot of the things that a lot of people are really curious about, a lot of that information is steady coming up in Firefighter Nation. There's a lot of great people that are contributing a lot of information, guys from the street. A lot of it is people, that are new authors that have a voice. They've done a lot of work, and they want to be heard about the stuff they found out, and they're putting out some really really good information. So I wanted to, throw a bone out to Firefighter Nation and let everybody know about it and get a visit on it and check everything out.
Absolutely. Fire engineering has a large platform with multiple areas to go to. Make sure you check out the websites. Make sure you check out the bookstore. If you've not signed up for FDIC, that's one of the things you need to be doing is signing up to be at that show in April. You don't want to miss it. Save you pennies now, and if you're looking for a Christmas present, there you go. Ask somebody for that. That would be an awesome Christmas present to be able to get somebody a pass to FDIC that you give them underneath the Christmas tree. Again, thanks for coming on the show, Cap. Look forward to seeing it. To our listeners, look forward to seeing you on another edition of Fire and Training. Till next time, stay safe, train hard, train often, and remember, it's all about